This morning at TYTI Investigates, we broke a news story about previously unreleased documents concerning Pete Buttigieg and his handling of the secret South Bend police tapes, as well as his handling of the police chief at the time, the city's first black police chief, a gentleman named Darrell Boykins, who was first told to resign and then ultimately was demoted for his handling of the tapes. And the new documents we have include two kinds of documents. So the first one I want to mention real quickly is a deposition taken from a gentleman named Mike Schmool back in 2013. If you know Mike Schmool's name, it's probably because he is currently Pete Buttigieg's presidential campaign manager. When Buttigieg took office as mayor in 2012, Schmool was Buttigieg's chief of staff. So he was really Buttigieg's point person on the police tapes issue, on the handling of Boykins' demotion, as well as the termination of Karen DePape, who was the woman who first heard the controversial content of these recordings and then transferred them onto cassette tapes. So that's one thing we've got, the deposition, which I should point out, it doesn't have your classic fun redactions of big black bars, but it does have blank pages where city attorneys deemed some of the content not releasable. So that's mostly there, but not entirely there. The other documents we got were documents that we've already reported on in redacted form. So essentially, we've already reported on these documents and we've seen portions of them that were redacted, and we reported on that a few weeks ago. And we didn't see those documents from an official source or anything like that. So this represents the first time that the city has officially confirmed, yes, these documents are real, and they've redacted again portions of those documents, which if you go through the link to our story, you'll see what we've done on some of these pages is we've taken the clips that we had screen grabs of that were redacted, and we've slid them in precisely to where the redactions are. So if you follow those links, I'll put them in the comments section once I'm done, and you'll be able to see for yourself. The redacted stuff that I just referred to, that had to do with our report from a few weeks ago, which was specifically that two Buttigieg donors, who deny that this took place, by the way, are said by police to be involved in a plan to pressure Buttigieg as a candidate in 2011 to get rid of Boykins once Buttigieg becomes mayor in 2012. Buttigieg is said in these documents to be unaware of the plan, but by June of 2011 is said to have agreed to get rid of Boykins. The story that we have today is focused a lot more, I would say, on this deposition from Mike Schmool. And the reason for that is because there are pages and pages of specifics that we have yet to hear before about who learned what when, from whom, in what circumstances. So a lot of these things have been played out very general terms, but some of the things that Schmool says here are very specific, and some of them appear to contradict or conflict with some of Buttigieg's public statements on the issue. And I should be very clear, the Buttigieg campaign, I've spoken with them in some detail about the reporting that we just did this morning, and they were quite clear with me that they see no conflict between the specifics in Schmool's deposition and the statements that Buttigieg has made along the way. So their position is there is no conflict, there are no contradictions. As I go through these, I'll do my level best to represent whatever response, if any, we got from the Buttigieg campaign on why that's the case in that specific instance. The big one, I think, is the first one I want to talk about. The documents, let me back up. Buttigieg has said publicly, I believe he said it in his CNN town hall earlier this year, he did not know what was on the tapes and did not know whether he could legally even ask. And what the other documents, not the deposition, established was that lawyers acting on his behalf did ask and did know. And the Buttigieg campaign's position is that they are telling us, they have told us, that Buttigieg took no part in the litigation essentially the term firewall wasn't used, but that's the scenario that was described to be by the Buttigieg campaign, was that the concern over legal restrictions against releasing or disclosing this information led them essentially to instruct the lawyers. It was the lawyer's job to make sure that Buttigieg did not know what was on the tapes. That's their current position. That's not something they've said before. They've just said he doesn't know. They haven't said, but we do have documents that reveal it. And the one thing that other people have pointed out that I do want to make note of here is that there's no legal principle that says you, as an individual or as a mayor, cannot ask what's on secret tapes, but your lawyers can. Okay, so that's one thing to note. And the other is that, generally speaking, your lawyers are your representatives. And when they get information, you are entitled to participate in your own defense. And there are very narrow circumstances under which lawyers are not A, allowed, and B, potentially obliged to apprise you of the information they accrue in the course of their defense in litigation against you. So Buttigieg's position seems to be here the most extreme, or you could say cautious, responsible, prudent approach to this, which was not even to find out, let alone to ask. That said, reporters have been asking without legal consequence since April of 2012, what was on these tapes. And again, without legal consequence. There's no evidence that the lawyers who asked these questions suffered any legal consequence. So that's one issue where I think there are some questions in terms of reconciling these two things. Another is that Buttigieg said publicly that, and possibly even in the same CNN town hall, that he demoted Boykins because Boykins lost his trust. The reason Boykins lost his trust was that Buttigieg found out, not from Boykins, but from the FBI, that an investigation was underway. According to Schmool's testimony, however, on January 18th of 2012, two cops came to Schmool's office and told him that they believed that the chief, Darryl Boykins, had been listening in on their phone lines, and then in a follow-up email said they were considering bringing this to investigative authorities. Schmool is then asked, "What did you do about this?" And he says, "I told the mayor." And then he's asked, "And then what did you do? What action did you take?" And he says, "We didn't have to take any because 1 or 2 days later, we got a call from federal prosecutors telling us that they were looking into this." So Schmool's testimony appears to contradict Buttigieg's claim that he learned about this from the FBI. Schmool testified that he told Buttigieg about this. And you can decide that's important or it doesn't matter, that's up to you. But the other issue it raises is, when exactly was Boykins supposed to tell Buttigieg about this? According to Buttigieg's initial description of this dynamic, Buttigieg was upset that he learned about it from the FBI instead of from Boykins, meaning Boykins should have told Buttigieg about this before the FBI told him about this. But Buttigieg knew about it before any of them. So that, I think, leaves unclear when exactly Boykins was supposed to have brought this information to Buttigieg's attention. Now, again, I should point out, the campaign says, look, something like 2 months went by after the feds issued the first subpoena on this case, and Boykins never brought the issue to Buttigieg in all that time. 2 months meaning between when the mayor's office was told by the cops about this and March 23rd of 2012, when Buttigieg's attorneys and his chief of staff, Mike Schmool, actually met with prosecutors in the FBI. So those are some of, but not the exclusive issues that are raised in here. There are also questions of why exactly did Buttigieg and Schmool feel that demotion for Boykins and termination for DePape were their only options here. According to Boykins' deposition, he was first told by Schmool to step down on March 26th, just 3 days after U.S. prosecutors, this was the Northern Indiana U.S. Attorney David Kapp at the time, said to Schmool on March 23rd, you have 60 days to get this stuff in order. And according to Schmool, Kapp held up 2 fingers and said, you have two issues. Your chief of police, that's Darrell Boykins, and your director of communications, that was Karen DePape. You have 60 days, and he also said, and you have policy issues. You have 60 days to take care of and remedy all of this stuff. Schmool is asked, did Cap tell you that those two had to be removed from their positions? Schmool says no. Schmool is asked, did Cap tell you that if you do not remove Boykins and DePape from their positions, indictments will follow? Schmool says no. Schmool is also asked, did you tell Buttigieg that they will be indicted if we do not get rid of them? And Schmool says no. The rationale offered by Schmool for why termination and removal from his position in the case of Boykins were the only options was that was essentially the legal and law enforcement firepower in that March 23rd meeting. Meaning Schmool testifies, he's pressed, right? If Cap didn't say specifically you have to get rid of them, where did that impression come from? I'm paraphrasing, of course. And Schmool's response is basically the people in the room were the number one lawman in the state, federal lawman in that district of the state, and as well as I think the number 2 FBI for that region. So these were undoubtedly, for that region, high-powered people. And that is the essence of the argument for why they had to go, for what constituted the clear message. Buttigieg has referred to a clear message from feds that these two people had to be removed from their positions. It turns out that what transmitted that message was simply the presence of high-powered people at the meeting. There's no indication that Schmool or the outside counsel that Buttigieg brought in said to Cap at the time, well, what about a reprimand? What about a letter of censure? What about a suspension? What about a probationary period? There's no indication that instead of acting just 3 days later, that the administration considered using much more of the 60 days that Cap gave them in order to pursue other options. For instance, who says? Like, maybe the FBI is wrong. Schmool uses the term, and here I am quoting, he says, we took the FBI briefing at, quote, face value. Well, you don't have to, right? You're a town, they're the feds, you could go out and get qualified legal expertise on the issue and find out, you know what, can we stick up for our chief? Was he actually doing anything wrong? And one of the themes that comes through, and this is something you can see even without these documents, is that the narrative presented by the cops who first complained about Boykins, who, by the way, were the same cops whose plan to get rid of him was captured on these tapes, according to the documents, the cops' narrative was accepted, again, at face value by Buttigieg. Buttigieg even refers in his book to court filings as an authoritative source. But the court filings he's referring to are allegations made by the cops, right? They're not proven. Just because they're a court filing doesn't mean they're proven. And just because a federal prosecutor says you've got a problem with two people doesn't mean they have to go. And in fact, the narrative of how prosecutors first brought this to Buttigieg and Schmool's attention was that we've got a complaint that your police chief has been illegally listening in on officers' conversations with the express intention of determining the cops' loyalty to Chief Boykins. But in late May of 2012, when David Cap, the U.S. attorney, sends his letter essentially saying to the city, here's my resolution of the case. We're not going to prosecute. He refers to the fact that the lines were mistakenly recorded. Cap himself says the line was mistakenly reported. In other words, he rejects the notion that this was a conscious violation of privacy by the chief in order to determine these people's loyalty. And he also says that at the March 23rd meeting, the face-to-face meeting that city officials, including Mike Schmool, had with the feds, he says our primary focus was the policy. And no prosecution is warranted. So what this all means, I'm not in a position to say, but what I think it does do is it raises additional questions, and there are ways of answering some of these things. We can get specific dates for when who was told what. When did Boykins learn about the investigation? When did Buttigieg? Did he actually learn about it before the feds called, or did Schmool not really tell him? And going even further back, Boykins was still in office, right? Buttigieg kept Boykins on in office, but he allegedly interviewed 2 other cops as well, both of whom appear on those tapes, at least in reference, if not their actual voices, according to these documents. So we don't know the exact timing of if or even when, or even if Buttigieg told Boykins anything more than, you know what, keep the chair warm and we'll see how it goes, whether or not I need a new chief. Because in his book, he says, I entered office knowing that major police reform had to be done, just not immediately. So was it in his mind to eventually find a replacement for Boykins? He did interview a couple other people, as I just said. So there's still a lot of lack of clarity here. And what it all means, I think, depends a lot on how you think about Pete Buttigieg. So hopefully people can put aside their feelings about Pete Buttigieg and just sort of look at this as an issue of potential systemic racism in a mid-sized to small cities police force, and consider the issues on those merits and think about what kind of information should we have given what we know and given what we don't know. And I don't know if any of you have any questions on any of this, because I have no idea whether I laid this out in a comprehensive way whatsoever. So if not, I apologize, but I'll take a look and see what you folks have to say. Nick does doozy. I think Nick is another newcomer to TYTI Daily, so welcome, Nick. Says, keep up the great work. Thank you very much. Gideon Black says, investigate Warren. She must be slowed down. So Gideon, here's how we approach things. We don't consider investigating people because we think they must be slowed down. If we have a tip or a reason to believe that there's something about Warren or her past that people should know about, then we'll investigate. Same thing is true of Bernie Sanders. Same thing is true of Cory Booker. Same thing is true of Beto O'Rourke. Anyone you want to name who's a viable contender. If you send us information about these folks, that's a real meaningful, actionable tip, we're interested and we'll look into it. Our tip line is theyoungturks@protonmail.com. If you want that to be secure, you need your own Proton Mail account. And I will explain one more time, for those who haven't heard it before, because we're getting new viewers all the time, which is exciting, but it also means I have to explain stuff that I've told to the old timers here in the past. So the question is sort of raised, why are you on Buttigieg? Why all the time Buttigieg, Buttigieg, Buttigieg? So a couple things I'll say to that. One is I actually do other things other than report on Pete Buttigieg. The other is that back in March, I finished up a previous obsession, reporting obsession, on the National Prayer Breakfast and the family, the group that sponsors it. And I was looking to get into looking at some of the candidates in the 2020 presidential race. And it seemed to me that you had a group of viable national candidates, and you had a group of candidates who had not been really vetted at the national or even state level. And Pete Buttigieg seemed to be kind of at the intersection of that Venn diagram. In other words, he had only been the mayor of a small to mid-sized city, so no one had ever taken a hard look, journalistically speaking, at the state level in Indiana, let alone at the federal level. So I went to South Bend in April and talked to people and did some research and looked into things, and it seemed like there were meaningful issues on the South Bend Police Department, concerning the South Bend Police Department, especially when it came to issues concerning race. And so I began to look into that stuff, and it's borne fruit, if I would say so. And people in South Bend, both Buttigieg fans and otherwise, there's someone I've met and had drinks with who works for the mayor, who loves the mayor, and has said, that our reporting is like I think the phrase was 99% of 100% of what you report is right on. So that explains, I think, our focus on it. And the decision to stay on it has only resulted from the fact that new avenues to explore keep coming up. So it's not that I think, what was the phrase? Buttigieg must be slowed down. There's any number of indications that he's not even performing all that well. But the reality is, set the presidential race aside, this matters to human beings in South Bend right now, and human beings in South Bend next year and the year after that. The systemic issues that South Bend people and police and governance are all dealing with are all issues that apply in cities and towns throughout the country, right? And so it seems like to me as though it's a worthwhile thing to look into, regardless of whether Pete Buttigieg is at 3% in the polls or 30% in the polls. So let's see what else you folks have. Let's see. Dennis Miller, I'm assuming not says apparently he isn't human if he didn't get results from the investigation. I'm not sure what that means. Will Doon says pragmatism kills. Benino Isagani, says investigate Biden. He is obviously corrupt. So I've actually talked about Biden a little bit before in terms of why we're not dedicating considerable resources investigating him right now. It's basically because other people whose footprint we cannot match are already all over this, right? We try not to be redundant. We try to look for areas where other people are either not looking at all or are not achieving results that we, in all of our due modesty, think maybe we can get. So if you've got a tip on Biden, if you used to work for that campaign, if you worked for Hunter Biden, go ahead and send us that tip, and we're happy to pursue it and follow up and dig into it deeper. But in terms of starting off fresh, going after Biden, that territory is pretty well covered right now. As for him being obviously corrupt, I think this is also something I've talked about before. There's no indication that he's corrupt in the eyes of the law. There's plenty of indications that the laws that make that true are themselves corrupt. So it depends on what you mean by that. Milo Wadlin is commenting on the state of my facial hair, aka gone. And the reason for that, I was going to let it grow, but I was actually this morning on the Hill TV Live, has a program called Rising, and Crystal Ball, who's one of the anchors there, she had talked about some of our reporting on Pete Buttigieg in the past, and they had me on the program this morning to talk about this story. So away went the facial hair. Let's see what else we've got here. Dave C says, Biden was supposedly vetted, but the Ukraine allegations make me think none of the candidates have been fully vetted. That's probably true. That's probably true. And part of that, I think, is there are limits on disclosure, right? In terms of what we know about where they went and why and who they met with. And that's true of all of them. Sanders, Warren, Biden, Beto, Buttigieg. Samantha Dowles says the problem with Pete's city police are still happening present day. Samantha adds that she's driving, but still listening, to which I would add, of course, Samantha, please don't be commenting while you're driving. And for folks who don't know, Samantha is actually, I'm sorry for outing you, Samantha, here, but in the interest of transparency, Samantha is an activist in South Bend who's been following my reporting and is someone I've spoken with on and off during the course of my reporting as well. And it looks like, I think you guys are done chat-wise and question-wise. So if you don't have any questions of me, I guess the question I would ask of you is, I'm trying to think of a way to put this. Let's do this. Let me do this. If there are any Buttigieg fans listening to this, first of all, I would say welcome. And secondly, I would say, I get it. There's a lot to be a fan of. And I'm not saying I'm not a fan compared to any other candidate. I'm not no one, I don't know that anyone cares who I'm planning on voting for, but generally speaking, I don't let my opinions about anyone personally influence my endeavors to be fair on their behalf if I decide to report on them. But also I haven't dug deep enough into any of the candidates to say yes, no, never, any of that. So my question to Buttigieg fans, a lot of whom have taken umbrage at the fact of what we've had to say about this in our reporting, but also at our decision and my decision to focus with the intensity that I have. I guess we've done something like half a dozen, 7 or 8 stories, something like that, over the past 6-7 months. So I guess my question to you would be, how do you sort of endeavor to make sure that you keep an open mind? And in some sense, this goes for everyone. How do all of you, I guess, make sure that you're keeping an open mind about information that may come to light about a candidate that you like, in order to weed out information that you think is false or is maliciously motivated by politics, or maybe is both maliciously motivated and false? How do you grapple with that? And does it matter if the information is true? Does it matter if it's maliciously or adversarially motivated in a political sense? So that's something I'm curious about. Samantha, just a quick update. Samantha has her eyes on the road. Her daughter Taryn is typing for her. So apparently somewhere out there in South Bend or the immediate surrounding environs, Samantha Dowles is tooling down the road, listening to me prattle on, while Taryn is typing on her behalf. So no one has responded to my request for insights into how you approach negative or adversarial coverage of a candidate you like. So maybe I should take that as my cue to just wish you all a good day and shut my face for once and for all, at least for today. So that's what I'm going to do. I'll do my farewell spiel. If you folks have any questions at the last minute, I'll try to get to them. Otherwise, as always, please put them in the comments. Your thoughts, your feedback, good, bad. We're interested in it all, and we assume good faith on everyone's part. So if you're a critic, we don't assume that means you're a troll. So we're interested in hearing about it and engaging in it. And I do want to say, here comes the spiel. Every morning, every weekday morning at 11:30, we do this right here, usually live, unless we've got a pre-taped interview that we're sharing. And the reason we do it live at 11:30 a.m. and the reason we ask you to subscribe to TYTI Daily, to TYT Investigates here on YouTube, is so that you can join in the conversation after the fact. As you've seen here, we had a little bit of a back and forth, and I'm always happy and curious to have new voices in that conversation. So I hope you'll join that conversation in the future. If you think that what we've had to say here is worthwhile, or on our other videos is worthwhile, I hope you'll share it and let people know about what we're doing here at TYTI Daily and TYT Investigates. In the meantime, I'll post the links to the article in the comments. Take a look, share your thoughts, take care of each other, take care of yourselves, be well. Bye now.